So we are continuing with the diagnosis of white rock, formerly known as black rock. And we are following the piece written in the Financial Times of yesterday, Tuesday, the 23rd of March, 2021, by Aziza Kasumov. She is shown as based in New York. And her Twitter account is headed, "I can't find my cigarettes." That is just a contextual reference. The public complaints of Benghazi, Nguai, and McGee were also echoed in interviews the Financial Times conducted with 10 other current and former BlackRock employees from diverse backgrounds. This is very interesting, this paragraph. Well, these two paragraphs. All asked for anonymity, citing fears of potential consequences. That means that BlackRock, White Rock, has been running a thuggish environment. Some said they had signed non-disclosure agreements upon leaving BlackRock. That is fascistic. Some said they had suffered from anxiety or depression as a result of their experiences. One current employee of White Rock, that is, said she was, it's clearly a woman, so she was ridiculed for her pronunciation of words by two white co-workers. Others said colleagues suggested that they had been hired at BlackRock only as part of diversity efforts. Others said colleagues suggested that they had been hired at BlackRock only as part of diversity efforts, or because their athletic talent had catapulted them to one of the country's top universities. One black former employee recounted being told by a white male human resources director, quote, to tone it down and not be my full self at work, because by being gay and black was just too much for people at work, unquote. It's an emotional toll to work at BlackRock as a person of color, unquote, said one current employee, quote, every time I see another person of color joining or interning, that is working as an intern, I'm like, please escape, find a better opportunity, unquote. So this is the truth about the very racist White Rock, the world's biggest asset confection operation. And this is the article, the full article. It is wider than the screen capacity, but we'll have a go. This is the item. So the Financial Times is a broadsheet. So it's a kind of broadsheet. So it's not the whole page, but almost the whole page of the Financial Times of Tuesday, the 23rd of March, 2021. And that man at the bottom is Larry Fink, the chief executive, who is, of course, in denial. But at the same time, he has hired or retained the top New York law firm, according to the news in the last 24 hours, to investigate the claims. And what they will do is not investigate the truth. They would investigate ways to squeeze and wriggle out of the allegations of racism, sexism, and anti-Muslim hostility and hatred, and assorted other misconduct that dominate BlackRock. Now, it would be interesting, but it would not be a realistic expectation. But it would be interesting to find if Financial Times has conducted an inquiry, an investigation into the history and the conduct of BlackRock as a whole. We shall be looking for the and this from the African one called Nguei. The pronunciation is Nguei. I don't know whether it's the correct pronunciation, but that is the pronunciation. So he's quoted in the last paragraph of this Aziza Kasumo in the Financial Times of the 23rd of March 2021. Not having grown up in the US, I have never been conditioned to believe that I was a minority. Exactly. Said Nguei, the co-author with Bengapsia of the Open Letter to Fink. And then you get to BlackRock and you realize, as far as the senior leadership of this team is concerned, the only reason you are here is to boost the diversity numbers. So this is the man who is the diversity deploying peddler of the lies about racism for racism. And they're denying about Bengapsia's complaints already anyway. Then they're onto diversionary route. What they have been doing is not new, and we shall come to that when we talk about Hamlers and the denial of the duties as owed to the 4 schoolgirls. So there is a piece about Shamima Begum dated the 15th of March 2021, and it's carried in the, well, we're looking at the online version, of course, and it's carried online in the iNews or iNewspaper. It says the piece posted at 3:18 p.m. local time, which would be 15:18 hours GMT, on the 15th of March 2021. It has two names. One is Tasneem Akunje, and the other is Anish Kapoor. But in parts of the text, it reads, I think so, or in my view, which seems it's one of them. Most likely it is Tasneem Akunji who wrote this, and Anish Kapoor put his signature or his support to the piece. We shall be looking at more of this. So we'll go to today's iNewspaper and the Financial Times today. We'll look at the iNewspaper. And we go back to the contents of Briloped's GB News Bulletin. The opinion-led channel is making headlines before it is even launched. And it says Adam Sherwin. And when we said earlier, in the previous edition, I think, or the first edition, that it's collected some of the most poisonous elements around in the British media. We didn't exaggerate because there are two of them. One, of course, is Piers Morgan, and the other is Julia Hartley. We cannot say the last word because it, when re-edited by taking into account her real record, it spells an obscene word, so we're not doing this. Essentially, this is fronted by and this conceived by the poisonous elements in the UK, and although it is fronted by Briloped Andrew Neil, it cannot be his kind of confection. It's a number of forces which will emerge in due course as being Brexiteers and racists of worse kind than the ones that are deployed on this front page suggest. Now, anyone who is watching this, I don't know what time they're watching it or where they're watching it or what day they're watching this, should know that this program, this Khoodeelaar television channel, has no followers. We don't have followers and we don't follow anyone really. So what we are doing is putting on the record as if it's a library. It's a solo library, and anyone who is really interested in finding out what we're saying can come and find us through the search engines, the usual methods on the internet. Having said that, we haven't got any interactions with anybody, and the reason is that we maintain the integrity and the independence of this program and the content's originality and exclusivity. because we are offering and publishing original, exclusive, world exclusive content. And the purpose is to contrast our output and our contents with the others that are in the mainstream and are not original and are not telling the truth. So we have to distinguish ourselves from all of those and be truthful and remain truthful. And what we are doing about the demand against Tower Hamlets Council in East London focused on the Tower Hamlets Council's 6 years of neglect of its duty to safeguard children. Anyone watching this must be very careful what we're saying. We are not saying confusing, double-barrel things. We are saying very clear things. For example, we are saying that Tower Hamlets Council, as the local council, had been under a duty, as it is still under a duty, regarding school children, safeguarding children. And it doesn't have to be like parents. Anyone who knows parenting would know that the duty of safeguarding children, as relatable to parents, is of one kind when compared to the duties relating to the safeguarding of children, as has been now exposed in the last 11 years by referring to and looking at the behavior and conduct and movements of these 4 schoolgirls from Tower Hamlets. Shamima Begum is the one name that is obviously at the top of the list because of the frequency of her appearance in the news headlines and news items. And there are the other 3. And those other 3 and Shamima Begum are of very similar kind of age group. And they all were aged 10, around 10, or maybe 11, in October 2010, when Tower Hamlets Council put in place as incumbent in the corrupt post of mayor, elected mayor, somebody called Luthu Raman. Now, in January 2010, months before the actual referendum for having this election, I started campaigning against the elected mayor anywhere near Tower Hamlets. And my reasons included, it's not an exhaustive list, but my reasons for opposing the executive elected mayor included the clear kind of evidence that an elected mayor would be unfit for purpose. And the unfitness for purpose would be a function that is to do with the fact that the electors in Tower Hamlets generally, and the electors from the Bangladeshi origin community of electors in particular, would be unfit, unable, unfit, and unwilling to hold the incumbent to account. And I said that would mean that it would be a corrupt council. That is to say, Tower Hamlets Council, which had been corrupt right from the beginning in 1965, would be made even more corrupt. That's what I said. And I said that there was no evidence that ordinary people in the community, in Bangladeshi origin community, it's not Bangladeshi national, because most of the Bangladeshi descendant people in Tower Hamlets, as in the rest of the UK, are of British nationality. So the question was not about nationality. The question was about the kind of heritage and the culture of political corruption that dominated the same community and would dominate the same community. That is what I said. And I said all of that on the evidence, not because I was opposed to one individual or another, or that I was jealous of anyone. I was not jealous. I'm not jealous of anyone. Most people who are relating to me in terms of referencing to me, they are the ones who are jealous of me. I have never been jealous, and I don't have never had any need to be jealous of another person. Most certainly not anyone from any part of the subcontinent, and absolutely none in the rest of the world. My issue is and was and has been and will be that anyone who is put in the post of elected mayor would be undemocratic, and their being undemocratic would carry with it the very serious risk of them committing crimes against the community, against democracy. And by the time the crimes were kind of realized or recognized, it would be too late. That's what I said. And that's what I would have said, even if it was called something else, but with the same kind of recklessness built into the post. Looking at the evidence today, Wednesday, the 24th of March 2021, in Tower Hamlets, and looking particularly at the contents and the kind of orientation and the agenda being put across to the ordinary people in the community by what I call the ethnicity-linked outfits and outlets, which themselves call themselves media, but whose contents do not qualify them to be called media, because they are completely various manifestations of lying and lies and ignorance. It's not something I'm making up, and it is not something I have any need to make up. It is all there on the evidence. And so therefore the media, the ethnicity-linked media so-called, in the Bangladeshi related community, if you like, is unfit to tell the public the truth about the behavior of the elected mayor post holder. Why is that related to the post holder? Because of the demography and because of the history of, let's say, the last 50 years in terms of local elections, etc. Well, the local election the last 30 years, let's say very clearly, has been kind of significant because of the numbers of Bangladeshi origin people becoming elected councillors for the first time on Tower Hamlets Council, starting in the election that took place in 1990. And because of that, the kind of proximity or nearness or closeness of the concept of democratic analysis with the significantly active part of the electorate is very relevant. And the Bangladeshis, as electors of the significant numbers of, if you like, councillors for the first time in 1990 and almost at every election since then, although the actual total number of Bangladeshi councillors or Bangladeshis or Bangladeshi origin persons being elected councillors, that number has significantly been reduced or got smaller. Despite that fact, there are still significant numbers of Bangladeshi origin or Bangladeshi descended councillors on Tower Hamlets Council. And not a single one of them, I repeat, not a single one of them has been raising the issues of democracy, accountability, answerability to the community, least of all to the electors, least of all to the Bangladeshi electors. Because the Bangladeshi electors component is the leading one, is the decisive one, because without the Bangladeshi electors being of that number as they have been among the electorate, the likelihood of Bangladeshi origin or Bangladeshi descended persons becoming elected councillors on Tower Hamlets Council would be very seriously reduced. So therefore the Bangladeshi electors are important in the election or electing of the large or significant numbers of Bangladeshis as councillors. That is the relationship. And so therefore, if those councillors think and are convinced that these electors or these parts of the electorate would be demanding accountability and rigor and honesty from the councillors, then the councillors would be differently behaving. But there is no such evidence that this would be the case. And it has been proven, let's say, by the last 11 years, and I'll come to that. Because the elected councillors don't think that the Bangladeshis or the active Bangladeshis among the electorate would be demanding of the councillors to be accountable, honest and truthful, and answer to the community according to the high standard of morality and ethics that would be required for them to be answerable and to answer to the community. Because the councillors don't think that would be the demand from the electors, the councillors, the electors of the councillors, that is, majority of the electorate or members of the Bangladeshi community among the electorate, let's say. Councillors don't think that Bangladesh will be demanding of councillors to deliver democratically and accountably and answerably. Because that is the case, these councillors don't think that any moral claim, such as by any movement or any campaign, including this one by the Khoodeelaar campaign currently, for justice for these children, these 4 girls, these councillors don't think that even if they don't support this campaign for justice for these 4 school girls, that these councillors, these Bangladeshi councillors, will lose any votes at the next election. That is true. There is only one little snag, which is that whatever the electoral kind of security they have, or the vote banks security that these councillors have had or have currently before them at the next election, the bigger issue when it comes to the ordinary experience of Bangladeshi people or Bangladeshi Muslims, compared to that, you could cite the ordinary experience of Indian origin people in other boroughs, because in Tower Hamlets, the numbers of Indian origin electors is not very significant. But they are significant in other boroughs. For example, in Southall, Ealing borough, or in Newham, and other boroughs, some other boroughs. But in Tower Hamlets, when it comes to ethnicity linked population among the electorate from the subcontinent, let's say, it is mainly Bangladeshi, and not only Bangladeshi, Siloti, the region in the northeast of Bangladesh and adjoining parts of the Indian province of Assam, where Siloti language and culture dominate. And because the councillors from Bangladesh or Bangladeshi descended backgrounds kind of correspond with the council, electors of council, Bangladeshis from Sylhet, let's say. There is this absence, there is this serious absence of any evidence that the Bangladeshi origin councillors don't really have any confidence in the Bangladeshi origin voters and vice versa. Even when four girls, schoolgirls from the same community have, for the interest of analysis and narrative, I'll use the term kidnapped rather than being, quote, radicalized. So let's compare those two in the long run. This is part of a long analysis. It is part of, let's say, 1 million words length of analysis in the current form. So remember what I'm saying. Bear that in mind. And you will not find this anywhere else. This is why it's called world exclusive, original. All these words apply. So because the Bangladeshi descended councillors come from the similar background as the Bangladeshi descended electors do, there is an absence of rigorous questioning by the electors of the councillors, because it actually gets completely confused and diluted, and the councillors can make all kinds of pretense and pretend assurances, and these pretend assurances keep them still getting the votes of the Bangladeshi descended voters. So the case of these four girls who have been kidnapped has been diluted by two external, in terms of ethnicity and in terms of the constitution of the segregated society, because Britain is very much a segregated society in every respect, despite the fact that Tower Hamlets is a multi-ethnic and multi-racial kind of community. Among the electors, there are various groups divided along the lines of ethnicity, language, religion, and no religion, etc. So what is happening with the four schoolgirls that were kidnapped first, and then the kidnapping was suppressed, let's say they got kidnapped, and the fact that they were kidnapped was denied by the local council. Can you imagine a situation in any part of the world? When these African girls in Nigeria got abducted by the thing called Boko Haram, there was such an outcry in the world, including Michelle Obama. Obama, because of the high profile, that's why I'm mentioning. Not exclusively Michelle Obama, but even the likes of Michelle Obama were recruited as supporters for the campaign to free these girls. It was an alarming situation, and rightly so. Yet here were four Tower Hamlets schoolgirls, all Muslim, and had been, let's say, kidnapped. And there was no outcry in the community. Think about what we are saying. If somebody else comes along tomorrow and says these very same things, remember, they will have stolen this broadcast or stolen from this broadcast. Because none of them, whoever they are, none of them has said anything like what I'm saying. And none of them will say anything of their own accord, ever. And that is a kind of ingrained, established fault in the community. And the result is that these children, these 4 girls, have been abandoned and have been neglected and have been treated as if they have been forgotten. This is why we started the campaign on the 26th of February 2021 to make sure that none of that happens, that these children are given the justice that they have been owed but have been denied. Now, when I say these children, I of course refer to all of them, and I have no idea what happened to the 2 girls that allegedly have been killed in incidents in Syria. I have no evidence of that. So I'd say that what I'm saying about their being owed safeguarding children duties, I am timing and putting that in the frame of the years where they were alive, and all of those children were children when they were alive in those years. Now, collectively, if you treat the local council in that role as having the safeguarding duty to protect children, then you can collectively say that Harmless Council was in a position of what a single child's teacher at school is called. And the relationship between the teacher and the individual child is as a loco parentis, as the similar to the parent. The locus, the relationship, the status is similar to being a parent for the duration of the child's stay within the sphere of the control of the school. Now, Tower Hamlets Council was never going to be a school house. Its duties to safeguard children was going to be of different physical nature. It was going to monitor the various centrally relevant events and issues and collect information and make the decision as to what step to take to safeguard which children and in what way and where, on what date and how. Those details are not for us to work out. Those details are for people on the ground actually considering the case or cases and rationally, within the reasonable, tried and tested way of human society and human activities, take the action that would be most appropriate to safeguard these children from the particular danger or dangers that they were facing at the time or times. That is the short expectation, short description. So the question again is, did Tower Hamlets Council take the action? Safeguarding duties, did it discharge its duties, and did it take the actions that were necessary? We've been asking this question since 26th of February in specific terms. In the way that we have been publishing these questions and these analyses, since the Supreme Court rubber stamped the Home Office's racist anti-Muslim objection or appeal against the Court of Appeal ruling that allowed Shamima Begum to return to the UK to represent her appeal against the removal of her British nationality by the Home Office. And just to avoid any kind of confusion, we say to the councillors that because of the composition of the council, Hrs Council currently, as an anti-democratic, unaccountable council, because of the lumbering of it with the corrupt post and corrupt post holder of the corrupt post of elected mayor, individual councillors are placed at a disadvantage whereby they cannot ask any question in the way that they would have been able to ask had there been no impediment post of elected mayor in place. We understand that. And with that understanding, we ask the individual councillors these questions. And we are not forgetting the role and the entitlement of opposition party councillors, but the reality is that the Hrs Council has hardly any councillors that are worth mentioning as opposition councillors. The handful of so-called opposition councillors are not reliable. They're not honest, they're not reliable, they're not rigorous, and they have not got the courage, and they have not got the respect, and they have not got the honesty to be cited as any significant councillors. We say that on the basis of the evidence, not because we want to say those things about any of them, but that is the evidence that strongly suggests that these three councillors or four councillors, whatever the number, can be cited or should be cited. They are not worth mentioning. That is what I am saying. Because at the end of the day, they have not used their so-called separateness from the Labour Party, which is the controlling party in Hrs Council. These four, or whatever the number of these so-called non-Labour Party councillors is, they have not spoken. And they have not spoken either about Shamima Begum or about the other three girls or about the council, most certainly not about the council's duties. So make a note of what we're saying. You have not spoken. If you have spoken, then tell us what you have said. But our conclusion remains, until you show us the evidence to the contrary, that you have not spoken. If you have not spoken, then what is your ground for claiming that you are better than the individual Labour councillors? Because you are not on the evidence. We are not addressing your humanity and comparing you unfavorably with others whose humanity we value more than yours. We have no such valuing of you or them. We are valuing and we are kind of diagnosing the evidence of your failure, your silence, your opportunism, and opportunistic silence about the Hrs Council duties and obligations as owed to these four school girls, and you have not spoken. As you have not spoken, there is no evidence, therefore, on which to establish any claim that you are any better as democratic representatives or defenders of the community than the Labour Party ones who are hampered from speaking, as they say, by the presence of the hindrance that is called the elected executive mayor. So we are saying that Hrs Council, in strictly speaking political terms, strictly speaking in the context of democracy, and as being the democratically elected kind of entity, it exists, but it exists in a dead form. This is what we have said before. And so, therefore, the only way that you can repair the damaged image of you, a collective or singularly as individual counselors, is to make a stand for justice and make a stand for constitutionality, make a stand for democracy and public safety and security and the protection of the children, for the protection of the children by the Tower Hamlets Council. You make that stand. Tell us what you have heard from us. Is it illegal? It is unlawful? Is it biased against one part of society or the bara as against the other? You will find that everything we're saying is legal, lawful, and not in the least biased against anyone. And we are saying that if those 4 girls were protected, safeguarded, at the time that they were kind of in danger, in any kind of danger of being led astray, if correct action were taken at the time, those 4 girls would be alive and home safely now. As thousands of their fellow schoolgirls and schoolboys, in contemporary terms, have been, because none of them has been in the way that these girls have been harmed. None of these boys and girls has been harmed or damaged or caused any damage to. So ask the Tower Hamlets Council, currently the council, either ask the chief executive, Will Tuckley, or ask John Biggs, the corrupt mayor of the corrupt post, what he is doing now. What he is doing now to make amends for the negligence that he showed towards Shamima Begum and the other 4 girls, other 3 girls. We give you a reminder about the timeline. These girls were born in 1999, let's say, between, about that time, 1999. So it is just over 21 years ago, or around 21 years. And most of their kind of primary school life was uneventful, and they didn't. I have seen no evidence or suggestion or indication that these girls were targeted by any of the sources or elements that did kind of lead them astray eventually. I don't think they were targeted while they were at primary school. So they were only targeted when they entered the secondary school. And the secondary school entrance coincided, let's say, not exactly, but about the same time as they went to the secondary school, Tower Hamlets Council underwent that change of becoming lumbered with an elected, completely corrupt post of elected mayor. Now that is the judgment, that corrupt post. Now assuming that the corrupt post holder and the corrupt administration in the council under that corrupt post holder were notionally to assert that they were not corrupt. Let's say that they were to assert that. I'm not saying that I would accept any such assertion as true, but I am saying that I think that they can say that they are not corrupt, or they were not corrupt, or they have not been corrupt. They can say that. But the evidence suggests that they were not entitled to assert that they were not corrupt. And the first evidence in this context of these 4 girls is that when they went to the secondary school, whatever the actual year that the targeting occurred, it occurred during the secondary school years until it became kind of triggered. It was like primed to explode in February or by February 2015. So it was being primed. They were being primed or groomed over a period. The period could be 1 year, the period could be 2 years, the period could be 3 years. So let's say that we go back from 1 year, from 2015. That would be 2014, the calendar year during which Lutfur Rahman had a second election of himself as the incumbent or candidate for the corrupt post of the corrupt elected mayor. So during the previous years, 2010, October 2010 to 2011, 12, 13, those 3 calendar years, one of those years, at least one of those years, when Lutfur Rahman was in post as a result of the October 2010 election, he should have done the job of safeguarding these children in that last year. Why am I saying that as the last year? Because in that year, Sharmina Begum, the first one who went to Syria in December 2014, experienced a number of upheavals in her life. Earlier in the year 2014, she lost her mom, who died of cancer. And that created a very serious emotional instability in Sharmina Begum, who decided to leave home and go live with her grandmother. Now, it is not clear, as I speak now, as to which of the 2 grandmothers she went to live with. But she did go and live with her grandmother, one of her grandmothers. Now, anyone who is familiar with the community in Tower Hamlets, the Bangladeshi community, would know that any grandmother, whoever the grandmother was, whatever her actual age or capacity or abilities, would not have been able to kind of conduct a monitoring exercise on her grandchild. The kind of monitoring exercise we now know would have been necessary for her to be conducting on the movement, the mood, and everything about her granddaughter. I'm assuming that this grandmother didn't conduct any monitoring of her granddaughter. And I'm assuming because there is no evidence that she knew that there was any need to so monitor her granddaughter. Not only that, when the granddaughter, not long before December 2014, when she went to Turkey and through Turkey to Syria, when the granddaughter asked the grandmother to let her have that is the grandmother's passport, the grandmother gave it to her, the granddaughter. The only thing she wanted to know was why was she asking for that passport. And the granddaughter said to the grandmother that she, the granddaughter, needed the passport as part of her work on a project at school. Now, any really aware grandfather or person who would have asked, I mean, what work would that be that needed the passport of the grandmother, not your own passport or your parents' passport, but your grandparents' passport? Why? What was the kind of purpose? What was the project? And anyone more savvy than that would have worked out that there was a very serious fishy activities going on. And that would have actually rang the bell, alarm bells. And most likely that would have been the beginning of the kind of project to stop Sharmina Begum going away to Syria. Not only did the grandmother give her the passport, she, the grandmother, also gave her 500 pounds, which more or less, according to various reports, was the main kind of amount of money that was needed for the plane ticket. Now, I'm not sure what the actual amount is, but let's leave that as the amount just for the time being. But she did take 500 pounds from her grandmother. Now, that did two things. One is that didn't involve her father in either of these transactions, the taking of the passport and the taking of the 500 pounds. And it is still not certain as to what the dialogue was between the grandmother and the granddaughter about those two things, because not only was the passport gone, but there was this 500 pounds. Now, she could have put the two together and worked out that the granddaughter was going to leave the country for somewhere. But she didn't. And because Sharmina Begum had started to live with her grandmother because of her, Sharmina Begum's discomfort at living at home with her father, who had now already married. So therefore, the grandmother would not have, in those circumstances, broken the trust of the granddaughter by telling anything like that or about any of the passport or 500 pounds, by discussing any of that with Sharmina's father, assuming that. And so therefore, what are we left with? What happened? Sharmina Begum, according to the entry in the Wikipedia, which our campaign has only seen in the last 2 days, maybe 3 days, Sharmina Begum was then kind of targeted by persons that are listed in the Wikipedia entry. I'm not going to repeat this. And those who targeted Sharmina Begum included at least 2 women, and they were based according to the Wikipedia entry, not according to me, because I don't know the veracity of that. I'm only citing a reference, strictly as reference, what has been contained in the Wikipedia entry about Sharmina Begum. That there were 2 women based at the East London Mosque, which is in the Whitechapel Road, London E1, which is in the London Borough of Tower Hamlets. And according to the entry in the Wikipedia, Sharmina Begum was told by these persons that if she went to Syria, assuming, and got killed, of course she would be a martyr, because she would be killed as a fighter for Islam. That was the line. The exact conversation is, of course, not mentioned in the Wikipedia entry, but that's the paraphrasing, based on the full kind of description in the Wikipedia of the facts concerned. And Sharmina Begum, who had lost her mom, became very emotional and upset with the arrangement at home, had gone to live with her grandmother, all of these factors are very much supportive of the construction of her state of mind, which is that she was very, very upset and she was in an unstable or very emotionally kind of charged state. And she needed stability, I would say, according to that description. And what this martyrdom included as a reward to her was that if she got martyred, then she would go straight to paradise and meet her mom who was waiting there. Imagine the scenario, imagine the steps. And this is only a 14-year-old girl or thereabouts. And although she is British by birth, the environment in which she was having to live after losing her mom and losing her contacts with her dad, who was a late arrival from Bangladesh. He arrived about 7 years before Sharmina went to Syria. So there was not a long kind of number of years she was with her father. And then she lost her mom and she lost real substantial contact with her dad. And then she was desperate to meet her mom. And this was kind of made possible in the fantasy confected by these unnamed women in the entry in the Wikipedia, who said that she would meet her mom if she got martyred, and she would go to paradise if she got martyred. And her mom would be quite practically, in terms of the scenario they created, would be waiting for her in paradise. Now, that was in December. She then, according to the Wikipedia entry, she was accompanied from East London to the airport, wherever the airport was. And these women went with her to the airport and made sure that she left. There is no mention of the other three girls during any of this. Whether they were in contact with Sharmina is not described. So we won't mention anything fanciful and just imagine. We won't. The only material connection between these other girls and Sharmina Begum took place after these three girls appeared at the airport in February 2015. Airport in Turkey, not in the UK. And according to that entry in the Wikipedia, these three girls also went there to get her back to Britain. Now that is a weak kind of explanation, because the rest of the explanation, the descriptions, contradict that possibility. But the fact that it is entered there is all we are mentioning. We are not saying that that is part of the coherent plan. So what these three girls did, according to the entry in the Wikipedia, was go there themselves. And once they went there, whatever the kind of gap between their arrival through the Turkish airport and the meeting eventually has not been explained, but they met. The four met together. Let's come back to Tower Hamlets and say all of this was happening and Tower Hamlets Council was not doing anything. So did the council, quite apart from the negligence shown towards and against these four girls, did the council in fact have a program for safeguarding children in place If it didn't, then it should be prosecuted. Tower Hamlets Council, not the council. John Biggs as the executive mayor should be treated as an offender and he should be prosecuted. That's what we are saying. Because he was certifying to the government that sum of money that the central government pays to or gives to local councils for particular specific provision of service was being stolen by the council, which was then abusing that money for something else, which was a criminal offense. So we shall be talking more about that in due course, and we shall be adding to the demands. We have a very long list of demands already against our Honours Council in relation to the negligence of its duty to these 4 girls. And we shall be talking about the general propensity to criminality and criminal negligence and lack of duty by the Tower Hamlets Council, and also built into the day-to-day kind of operational priorities and operational kind of abuses by Tower Hamlets Council are a wide-ranging, long list of criminality crimes that are committed by council employees and committed via council contractors and committed directly with the knowledge of Tower Hamlets Council's executive mayor, chief executive, and directors. In fact, all of them are committing various degrees and descriptions of crime against individuals and against sections of the community. Now, let's go back to what the current mayor, John Biggs, is involved in, let's say. Remember the Now, the record of Towners Council in the years, let's say 11 calendar years since the elected post of mayor was foisted on it. The record shows that the Towners Council became worse as a undemocratic council after the imposition of the post of mayor, because the elected councillors became kind of shut down, gagged permanently. Now, the gagging didn't take place like somebody ceremoniously putting a gag on the mouths of every single councillor. The gagging took place by bribery and collective deception. Bribery because some of the councillors who would never imagine themselves to be treated as well paid by council allowances as they became recipients of. And they were being given positions, bogus positions as cabinet members. And before we discuss and diagnose the other cabinet members, we go back to discussing the actual role of Ohid Ahmed. Now, Ohid Ahmed was given the ego boost by being called the deputy mayor to Lutfur Rahman. And neither Ohid Ahmed nor Lutfur Rahman would ever in their whole lives be able to occupy the kind of furnished offices that they did occupy, directly resulting from the fact that the democratic powers and the democratic legitimacy that belonged to the council were removed from the elected council and from the access by the ordinary electors and made available to Lutfur Rahman and anyone he thought would be able to serve his particular ego and interests. Now, neither Lutfur Rahman nor Ohid Ahmed had any record of campaigning for the community. And so therefore, when they became able to put themselves in those positions, they knew that the elected councillors would not challenge them or ask them to explain their behavior. And they also knew that they could not be held accountable to the ordinary electors, because the ordinary electors would not be able to be gathered in a way that physically delivered a demand and made Lutfur Rahman or Ohid Ahmed compelled to give the answers. They knew that. And by knowing that gap, Ohid Ahmed and Lutfur Rahman showed, in effect, two fingers to their duties. And the duties, in this case, remember what we are talking about, are 4 schoolgirls being kidnapped. As I said, for narrative kind of ease of communication, I've replaced the going to Syria by or with the word kidnapping. These girls were kidnapped because they were not being observed protectively with shielding, safeguarding them from harm by the council. And Ohid Ahmed was calling himself the community safety member of Lutfur Rahman's cabinet, but none of them, neither Lutfur Rahman nor Ohid Ahmed, were bothered to even check if that phrase had any significance in terms of relating to people that needed the council's protection and support. And this went on. To this day, that is, today is the 24th of March 2021, there has been no statement from Lutfur Rahman, no statement from Wahid Ahmad about what they did or didn't do to safeguard these children from Bethnal Green School. And as I said earlier, John Biggs should be prosecuted and Lutfur Rahman should be prosecuted as well. And Lutfur Rahman should be prosecuted along with Wahid Ahmad. This is the least that can happen. And those people who are campaigning, genuinely campaigning, to bring an end to the mayor system, should use this evidence of our claim as evidence in support of the argument for ending the elected mayor, the corrupt elected mayor post. The corrupt elected mayor post has completely aided and abetted and colluded in the aiding and abetting and the perpetration of the destruction of the lives of 4 schoolgirls, 4 human beings, 4 daughters of parents, whether dead or alive, 4 children that should have had a completely different course of life. And this has happened on the evidence, as we assert, on the evidence of the criminal negligence by post holders in executive positions in Tower Hamlets Council. And as part of the community's campaign for justice for these 4 schoolgirls, the UK central government should be asked to investigate what the council did or didn't do. So, for example, when Lutfur Rahman was in post, in the so-called post of elected mayor, there was frequently, not every day, but frequently, but often, let's say, an expression of wonder and surprise. And people murmured quite loudly. During the council meetings, because elected councillors met probably every 2 months or every so many weeks, and the thing was called full council. By the evidence of the contents of the council meetings, while Lutfur Rahman was in place as the so-called elected mayor, the full council, which would be spelled Full, should more accurately be spelled FOOL S apostrophe after this. Full's council. Because all the councillors sitting on the side of, let's say, Lutfur Rahman, that is to say, he was the executive elected mayor in post, and the councillors who sat on his side together could claim to be the controlling side of the council. Whatever the number, let's say, whatever the number of councillors that sat on the side of Lutfur Rahman as the controlling side of the council at the Full's council meetings behaved as fools. They would not, never, ever ask a single question and put it to the mayor, executive mayor, to answer. So they were behaving openly as fools, and they were showing contempt to the community, contempt to the electors. That is evidence that mayor system is not only corrupt, but it is embarrassingly, shamelessly corrupt, and it is unworthy of any electorate, any community, because elected councillors are openly defying common sense and refusing to ask any question about anything to do with any duties of the council to the community. Think about what I've said, and that is fact. By the way, I'm not saying anything that is not fact, but that word, that phrase, that is fact, is just an emphasis. Let me find this this reference to Robert Neal, who is an MP and a former licensed law trader. Said Isabella Freeman. Now, Isabella Freeman hit the Daily Telegraph, London blog, as a direct follow-up by that paper of MP Bob Neal a week ago for evidential references. We just put the thing on the Khoodeelaar blog on WordPress. For evidential reference, we published the main text of the Daily Telegraph piece condemning the Tower Hamlets Council's head of legal, Isabella Freeman's conduct today. And that today reference refers to 23rd of January 2013. And it's a piece headed Isabella Freeman, Lutfur Rahman's little helper, who brings council standards into serious disrepute. And it was last updated on the 23rd of January 2013. Now, this is the quotation from the Daily Telegraph's Andrew Gilligan. Among the most interesting members of the dreadful crew around Lutfur Rahman, I'm reading again. Among the most interesting members of the dreadful crew around Lutfur Rahman, the extremist linked executive mayor of Tower Hamlets is the council's assistant chief executive, a woman called Isabella Freeman, within brackets above, because that is a picture of Isabella Freeman. That is Isabella Freeman. And the next, she is one of the borough's shrinking band of senior white officials who has not been sacked or decided to leave. Now, that is, of course, a racistly motivated sentence. The fact that Andrew Gilligan says that senior white officials shows that to him, no white official should work with a non-white or a Bangladeshi or Asian or African post holder as leader of the council or a councillor, or in this case as, quote, mayor. Having said that, I should add that in October, beginning of October, let's say about 10 days or so before the election of October 2010 to the post of elected mayor, I encountered the same Andrew Gilligan in Commercial Road. And I condemned him as a racist. I condemned Andrew Gilligan as a racist liar and an inciter of hatred against the local community, based on various other blogs that he had published and posts that he had published elsewhere. And Gilligan had no answer. He could never answer. Anyone watching this knows that I do not encounter just anybody. I don't do this without evidence. So I didn't confront Andrew Gilligan without evidence. I knew that he had certain sources of information about Tower Hamlets, and he had some of the facts correct about Tower Hamlets Council that he was posting. But the projection by him of a thing called IFE, or Islamic Forum Europe, was completely unrelated to me and my experience. I never knew what this thing was. But the suggestion in his blog and his presentation very much referred to people who are active in the community. And there has been no one more active than me in defending the community, upholding the rights and all the speaking against racism and so on. So any identifiable person in the community in East London would be me first. And yet I had no idea what this IFE was. And I resented Andrew Gilligan's idiotic, perpetual suggestion that the IFE was like controlling everything. If it did, then of course it did in such a secrecy that I didn't understand, but I may be aware of later by investigation, but not obviously. None of the people I contacted or I was in contact with on a daily basis ever talked about the IFE spontaneously, unless somebody else referred to it and then became a point of reference. So I did tell off Andrew Gilligan, and there were two Bangladeshi girls who did not introduce themselves to me, but they were acting as Andrew Gilligan's kind of accompany. They were accompanying him when he was likely to meet a lot of Bangladeshi people in the local area on that occasion, on that evening. So I gave Andrew Gilligan about 2 or 3 minutes of my, if you like, articulation. And Andrew Gilligan, with these two girls, disappeared very fast. But he did take my kind of contribution because he was standing there not moving, and I gave the full flow of my rejection and diagnosis of his particular racist, idiotic generalization about the IFE. Having said that, I'm still reading a quote from his blog because of the contextual relevance of this piece, though. And I said everything about me, telling him off as a way of clarification and clarifier, so that I'm not hiding anything, I have no conflict of interest, and I'm not contradicting myself. So Gilligan goes on about Tower Hamlets Council. He says that Freeman is responsible for the standards regime, the code of conduct for Tower Hamlets councillors. That's what is relevant to the fact that the elected mayor, postholder, corruptly bribed all the other councillors on his side and thus made them unable to speak against him. Not only were they not able to speak against Lutfur Rahman, they were not even able to hear him say anything about what he was doing in the post of mayor during the full council meeting. And why did he not tell them about what he was doing in the full council meeting, where he was sitting next to the monitoring officer post holder, who was sitting next to the speaker of the council? And goes Goes on, here the Andrew Gilligan piece goes on. Last week in the Commons, that is House of Commons, under parliamentary privilege, the former local government minister, Bob Neal, told how Isabella Freeman and Lutford supporters have abused the standards regime to hound the mayor's opponents and protect Lutfur Rahman, bringing the council into this serious disrepute, or the post into serious disrepute. And one of the advice that Isabella Freeman, as the monitoring officer, gave about justifying Lutfur Rahman's silence and Lutfur Rahman's refusal to speak about his behavior as the mayor to the council, was that if Lutfur Rahman did speak, then he would be exposing himself to violation of his human rights. That is what Isabella Freeman advised. Now you have to be very seriously interested in fighting corruption and criminality to be able to follow everything what I've said. I've been doing this all my life, but the point is that I know that many people cannot sustain a rigorous engagement with the evidence, and this is why I'm saying that you have to be very seriously interested. And if you are interested in democracy, and interested in saving the lives of children and futures of children like Shamima Begum and the other three girls that were led astray, then you must take the job of elected councillors, elected mayors, elected MPs, what they're doing very seriously. Monitor them. And in Tower Hamlets, the need for a democratic, answerable, accountable, honestly run Tower Hamlets Council cannot be greater, could never be greater. There are 4 girls who have been destroyed, and nobody knows what number of other girls and children are being destroyed while we still don't know about them. And the reason why we don't know about them is because Tower Hamlets Council corruptly fronted currently by a corrupt mayor called John Biggs, has not been told the people of the community, the people of the borough, are not being told what the council is doing, about how many children and about how many of those children in what kind of difficulty. They don't have to name names. They have not got any reason to name names to the public, but they have every reason to tell the public what the difficulties are and what the volume of the problems that the council has been having to deal with regarding safeguarding children has been. The council is silent, just like Lutfur Rahman was silent. In most of the cases, most of the issues, John Biggs has been behaving quite intransparently and without accountability and corruptly, very much similar to Lutfur Rahman, which does not mean that John Biggs is not any better than Lutfur Rahman. It doesn't say that. It shows that both of them are unfit for the purpose, and the post is even more unfit for the community, because nobody can make them give any service, give any accountability, give any transparency. That is the danger. And once the elected councillors are given the gag, prevented from speaking, the councillors are as good as dead in terms of the road, and the community is in the darkness. For this reason, we must vote no on the 6th of May 2020, and no to the mayor, and never bring the mayor post back to Tower Hamlets. For the sake of these children, these 4 girls, and for the sake of everyone else.